Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got a guest for you this week, Katie Cross. She's a YA fantasy author, and she's also a military wife and mother. She's published 11 books and is the winner of the IAN 2015's Outstanding Fantasy Book Award. Her main series is the Network series, conveniently called. And we're going to talk to her today about how she's managing to write and publish this many books. And she sells them too. If you check out her Amazon ranking, she's got lots of reviews and stuff and is keeping them going, even though she doesn't necessarily publish a book a month or even, 6 books a year, whatever the indie average is these days. And Katie, welcome to the show. Hello.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. This is one of my favorite podcasts, so this will be fun.
All right. Well, why don't you do a better job telling us about yourself than I did and how you got into writing and publishing?
Oh, yeah, you did a great job. So I've been writing professionally for the last 5 years. I was a nurse before that. I worked in pediatrics. But I married a man in the Army, and the Army life is not conducive to being a nurse because you have to move all the time and there's deployments. And so I started looking at other options for careers, and I had been writing my whole life and I loved it. So I decided to try it out. So I started writing a fantasy story about a witch in a haunted forest. And I was on this website where people read it and give you feedback, kind of like Wattpad, but much smaller. And it took off. It won awards. It did really good. So someone had said to me, you should self-publish, and I didn't even know what that was. So I just started looking into it, and I mean, things just grew, and I released it like a year and a half, 2 years later, and here we are now, 11 books under my belt.
Nice. And it sounds like they're kind of YA fantasy, although I saw you also had books about bonbons and yoga pants. How did you come to choose that genre, and have you found it challenging, fun, rewarding?
Yeah, so I actually have two genres that I write under. I write young adult fantasy, which is my main one, that has the Network series and another fantasy series I'm bringing out. But I also started writing a chick lit series called the Health and Happiness Society series. That Bonbons Yoga Pants is the first book in that, and then I'm releasing soon the second book, which is called I Am Girl Power. The chick lit series was kind of an accident, actually. I started Bonbons Yoga Pants on Wattpad, and it totally took off. I mean, it's almost at 2 million reads, won a bunch of awards, just went totally crazy. So I had a ton of people wanting it in all forms. So I was like, all right, I'll just publish it. And then they wanted all the other stories that are connected to that book. So I just have this like random spin-off genre that I write in. That's been really fun. I chose young adult fantasy just because I love magic. I just really wish I could do magic. And I really have always wanted to be just one of those like brave souls that could run barefoot in the forest. And my main character is definitely that brave soul that runs barefoot in the forest. So it was challenging at first to get used to young adult as a genre because I read mostly like classic fantasy, epic fantasy, but the story definitely needed to be young adult. So once I read more in the genre and got used to it, it seemed to come more naturally. And now I love young adult and will continue to write in that probably for my career. Although my next fantasy series will probably be more epic fantasy geared.
All right. We've had people on the show with middle grade saying it was really hard to do ebooks. And then I've heard from YA that it's not as hard as children's books, but it can be challenging. Like they don't want to read on their e-readers, which sounds counterintuitive. You would think that's the generation that would be most likely to be using their phone to read. But what has your experience been like? I assume you mostly sell ebooks.
Oh yeah, ebooks are like 90% of my revenue at this point. You know, actually the challenge for me when I talk to my audience, which I have fairly good contact with a lot of teenagers, they like don't really have access to ebooks. Like most teenagers tell me like, well, my parents don't let me buy ebooks, like because they can't like just link up like their Amazon account to their phone, because I'm sure their parents are like, that's the worst idea ever, you know, so they can't just like buy whatever ebook they want. And I think, honestly, once they're on their phone, it's more about social media than reading. So I think you're right. I don't think ebooks with teenagers are always a huge hit unless they're big readers. And even though my books are young adult, I've actually found most of my audience is older than 20, maybe even in their 30s.
Yeah, that's what I've wondered. I know a lot of adults that enjoy reading the YA stuff, and I can see where it'd be hard because most kids don't have credit cards and can't just have their own Amazon account.
Right.
And you're right, the parents are probably like, no, we cannot put them on our account, or the 2 day shipping will be delivering who knows what to the door.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I've heard, especially my readers on Wattpad. I get like, I don't know, 100 comments a day on my story on Wattpad, and so many of them are teenagers, and they're constantly like, I wish my parents would let me buy ebooks. Or like one of my followers said, "What's an ebook?" Like they didn't even know what it was. So I was like, "Oh, that's sad to hear from my target audience."
Well, that's good that that platform exists, and I have a couple of questions for you later. We'll jump into the marketing stuff in the second half, but I have heard that it's primarily a teenage audience on Wattpad. Have you found that to be true, that they find your stuff pretty easily?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think if you're going for Wattpad, and you have like teenage geared books, you probably will do well, or books that teenagers like. It's really hard to sell much outside that, or not sell, but to get attention and readership much outside anything that teenagers would draw in. And a lot of that I think is just because it's free content. I mean, they can just log in and read all these fan fiction stories about One Direction, and it's free. So they don't have to pay for it because their parents don't let them have their credit card for ebooks.
And did you find you were at a disadvantage because One Direction was not featured in your fantasy series?
Anna Todd, I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but she got her start on Wattpad. So she started posting a fan fiction about One Direction. I don't even know the names of the One Direction people. I think was it Harry Styles or something? I'm not sure. Anyway, she started posting fan fiction every day, and it's crazy. Like it's had like like in the like hundreds of millions of reads, like just ridiculous. And she got this big book deal, and she goes to red carpet events and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I wonder if it wasn't fan fiction, what that experience would have been, because fan fiction tends to do best on Wattpad.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure it's a challenge to then get people to read your original stuff, even if they were following you for that.
Yeah, so I have Bonmo's Yoga Pants that got me 40,000 followers on Wattpad that is read constantly. That's the one I get hundreds of comments I can't respond to every day. But there is some spillover. I put the first book in my fantasy series on Wattpad, one chapter at a time every day for a couple months. And there is some spillover. I think that's reached almost 500,000 reads now. And sometimes, like at the end, I'll have people say, I've already bought the second book, or I bought the whole series and I love it. Or most of them just lament because they're teenagers that don't have credit cards that they can't, buy the books. There is some spillover, but it's hard to get. And it's not a lot. I think a lot of people start the fantasy story and are kind of like, oh, this isn't like our other stuff. I don't want to read it. And then they just don't. So.
Clearly, you should have had One Direction in the prologue, and then they could all die, and you could just start your regular story. But
Missed opportunity.
all right, well, let me hand you to the guys to ask a few questions.
Yep. Okay. Before I get started, I had a thought, and I want to say it now so that hopefully others will do it because it'd be hilarious. If fan fiction is what does best there, it'd be funny if you wrote a fan fiction and in it the characters were reading your original fiction, and then treat your original fiction like it was a spin-off of your fan fiction.
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
All right. So with that $1 million idea out in the open, because young adult, we're gonna talk about young adult a bit. Because young adult is an age range, not a genre, it seems like the books not specifically, books not specifically written for young adult will often end up there. You said that you had a story that had to be young adult. Like, what do you feel defines a young adult book?
Oh, that's a really good question. To me, I think it's all about the general feeling of the book. Like, I think I'm drawn to young adult because I don't know, not like I'm super old, but it kind of like puts me in that place where like I'm young again, and all these new exciting things are happening. Like my main character Bianca is 16 years old, and she's kind of like at that cusp of life where she's like making all these big decisions, and big things will happen after that, and her whole life is ahead of her. And that's kind of what I love about young adult, is there's so much more like coming of age to it, and there's like reminiscing that comes with that. With every every book you read that has that, you're kind of reminded of yourself, or you relive that moment again, and it kind of makes you feel more, because I've already lived that portion of my life, and I can kind of go back to it and relive those good moments, or live out this new adventure that happens, when I'm young and I don't have children or whatever. I think touching to that theme as a young adult author, that idea of, anything is possible, your whole life's ahead of you, you're coming of age, you're learning who you are. I think for me and other people that I talk to, that's a really big draw for young adult. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
I find like coming of age and having a younger protagonist, I find a lot like none of my books fit that description, but a lot of people start their reviews of my books with "This is a young adult book," blah 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 blah, and I think because it tends not to have any like adult content and therefore must be young adult. So I was wondering if maybe like simply not having steamy stuff on the page somehow makes it default to young adult.
Maybe. I would certainly say that could be a clarifier, but some of the young adult I have read or heard of, like, it's kind of a new thing. It's getting a little more steamy. It's getting not necessarily new adult, because that's certainly a different genre that tends towards that, but some people are breaking the conventions of young adult by introducing more controversial topics or sex or drugs and stuff into it because it's real. But historically, I think you've nailed it on the, like, you've hit the nail on the head. I think, oh, well, this doesn't have sex, this doesn't have all this other stuff, we'll just call it young adult, so it's more appropriate for like smaller, younger audiences.
Yep. All right. So you are a full-time author now? Like you're not still doing a day job?
No, yeah, I do full-time writing now.
Okay. How do you measure your output? Like, how do you do word quotas, or do you try to hit a chapter, or like how do you structure your writing time?
So I have a timer. I have like a certain amount of time every day that I get to work on my stuff, like on my actual writing and creation, and that's like my time for the day. And because I have a child and a husband that deploys all the time and two crazy dogs, and we just moved, I I just set the goal to meet the time, because to say, okay, I need this many words, I found I was just getting frustrated, because some days I could write 5,000 words in an hour, but some days I'd only get through one scene that's like 1,700 words. And I'm extremely results oriented. So if I can like make a list and say, okay, I had an hour today and I wrote the whole time, I turned the internet off, I just wrote, I feel really good about that. Look, I like knocked 2 scenes out, that's great. And then the next day, maybe I knock 5 scenes out, and that feels great too, because I just worked within that time range.
That sounds a good way to go, because when you boil things down to raw numbers, I've particularly been seeing this a lot lately with myself. Like you can come up 200 words shy and be like, well, I failed to hit my level. I guess I'm a failure for today. Meanwhile, if you just got good writing done, then that's enough, you know?
Right. Yeah. I that's what I found, and it bred a lot less frustration, when my son runs up and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. So when you have a limited amount of time to do your writing, do you think it's more important to focus on the preparation? And if so, like, is there still any room at all to sort of improvise and go where the story follows, leads you?
So you mean like preparation to the actual story?
Yeah, like outlining and stuff like that.
Yeah. So outlining has been like my key to success since I've had my son. When I had a little more time and I was working 10 hours a day as an author, it wasn't as big a deal. But knowing where my story's going, what my theme is, what my character arcs are, and where we're at and all of that, it helps me sit down and just slip right in and just start hitting the keys like super fast. So, I have it all in Scrivener, I have it all laid out, and I have in the notes section, like, okay, this, these are the scene beats. This is the climax, is the resolution, this is the hook. I have it all laid out for every single scene. So I sit down and I just nail it out super fast for the most part, and then go back through and do it again. But to be honest, the most important preparation for me is everything I do right up to writing time to prepare me for writing time. So like my son has had a nap, my dogs are hiked and fed, and everything in the house is settled, so I can sit down for 2 hours and write. So it's preparation on 2 levels for me.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people overlook, is that, like, if your goal is, well, I'm going to write for 2 hours uninterrupted, then you have to manage interruptions. And, like, I mean, it can be as much as whatever. I'm going to start a load of wash and write for an hour and then realize, oh, a load of wash takes 45 minutes. And I sort of messed that up. So, yeah, that's an excellent point, is managing interruptions and preparing for or writing a session.
Yeah, yeah, I will even go as far to like do everything I can up until nap time. Like I eat, I answer all phone calls, I literally like every single thing that could ever interrupt me is done. My phone is turned off, and then I sit and write, and that's, I know I can't leave the chair until like my son wakes up type thing.
Yeah, sounds like an excellent policy. All right, well, that's it for this section for me, so I'll hand you off to Jeff for a few more.
Can't leave the chair. I like that. I'm going to have to remember that one. But okay, do you read a lot of the YA stories? You know, that since you actually target the young adult audience, do you read a lot of those stories that are available?
Yeah, I try to. I read as many as I can. To be honest, I didn't like a lot of them when I was reading them, so I had to like branch out. And I was like, "Oh, it's good I'm writing in this genre because I don't like getting these books. So I'm going to make mine different."
So that leads into my first question: is what would you feel would be some common mistakes other white authors make that could easily be avoided?
Oh, um, I, I just don't want to throw any authors under the bus here. So I would definitely say it just comes back down to tropes. Like I think every book addresses like a familiar plot. Like, you know, there's the hero's journey or whatever. But I feel like in YA, there's so much writing to the market where there's like love triangles, or the girl is saved by the beautiful man, or there's, you know, the bachelorette meets whatever. I feel like there's just not enough variety in a lot of the titles that keep coming back up. From what I read, that I was getting bored with a lot of them, putting them back down. And the other thing is the protagonists were annoying to me. Like a lot of them were kind of whiny, and I was like, where's our strong female leads? You know, like where's a girl that can kick butt and take names? Those were the ones that bothered me the most.
Tropes. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. If you write in a certain genre, that people expect certain things to happen, but it gets monotonous after a while. Your covers for your network series titles, very striking. They look awesome, by the way. So my question for you is, how did you come up with the overall design for that? Because I love how you have different shades and that little design thing that you have above and below the actual book title. How did you come up with that? Did you do it yourself, or do you have those professionally done?
Oh no, I wish I could take credit. Those things are gorgeous. So my cover designer, her name is Jenny. She works at Seedlings Design online. She's incredible. I knew that I wanted to, you know, invoke that fantasy feeling, but I was determined. I did not want a female in a dress on the cover. I mean, if you look at the genre, that's all there is out there. Some of them are really pretty, like the Kier Cast Selection series. Like the covers are gorgeous and striking. That just wasn't Bianca, my main character. She hates dresses, you know? So I wanted to still invoke like a fantasy feeling without catering to this like female in a dress. So I just told my designer, like it was someone else at first. His name is Corey, and I later went to Jenny and she redid my first book. But I wanted to invoke a feeling of each book in the cover as well as a fantasy. So we designed the covers to kind of look like an old fantasy book. So Miss Mabel's has like a leather textured background, like a book would, and then there's ivy design around the title, and that has specific symbolism with that book. And then the next book looks like a stone background because the book Antebellum Awakening takes place mostly in this medieval castle that has stone. And the scroll work, I think, is dragons. There's like, I've done like so many covers for this series, I can't remember them all. So yeah, they just were meant to invoke a specific theme in the book, as well as that old age kind of fantasy feeling. And honestly, I think my covers, as most people can be attributed to most of my success in my books, is just they're very striking.
They really are. I mean, it's eye-catching right off the bat, because the first thing I was looking at, all of them are going, well, there's very clear author branding in place. You know, these things are part of the same series. I love the different shades. I love how the different scroll work was. Some was a scroll, some was floral based, some was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, did she do that herself? My hat's off to you, because I'll be the first to admit I will stick to writing. I can't draw a stick figure if I had to. So So that's you're very well done on that, by the way.
Yeah, that was all Jenny. Graphic design is not my forte.
I hear that. Let's see. We've already answered my other question I had for you. So let me hand you back over to Lindsay. We'll get going on the marketing side for you.
Great.
Alrighty. I should say that for those who are wondering why she has dogs that keep her so busy, she has 2 young Vizslas, same kind of dog as me. So obviously, I said yes when she asked to be on the show. No, but okay, back to book stuff. How have you kept your book selling so consistently when, as 11 books in a few years is nothing shabby, but I feel like, if you're on K-boards and stuff, that people are like, man, if you don't put something out every 90 days, you're just going to plummet off the Amazon algorithms and disappear into obscurity. So what have you been doing to kind of keep things going? And I should say, too, you're not in KDP Select and Kindle Unlimited, so you don't have that advantage.
Yeah, no, Kindle Unlimited is not a world I wasn't very comfortable in there when I was there, and I've seen what happens sometimes in Kindle Unlimited, and I feel best with my eggs in mini baskets is all. I know Kindle Unlimited works fantastic for some people, and I think that's awesome. It does have an extra layer of challenge though, because I definitely miss out on whatever algorithms Amazon has in place. However, a lot of my marketing just centers around really like my activity on like Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter. I just try and keep active on there and help people, and that seems to just kind of sell things. And then the other thing is BookBub. I just had a BookBub on Monday with Miss Mabel's. So when you were checking out the rankings, that was probably why the rankings were so awesome. I just had another BookBub. Last year, I was really lucky. I got 4 BookBubs. I had one for Miss Mabel's. I had one for the prequel to my series. I had one for the first series, for the first book in my network series, and then I had one for the collection. So the network series is a 5-book, 1 novella collection, and I put them all into one book and, offer that as like $10. And I had a BookBub for that. So that in the last year has kept it really active just because they were constantly selling that way. But the beginning of this year, like I hit like a decent sized slump, from like February to April. I was really frustrated because book sales just weren't awesome. And I ask around a lot and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I feel like that's just kind of the nature of the beast, is the trough and wave kind of aspect of it, where sometimes you're doing really good and sometimes you're not. And the other thing is just publishing as much as I can. I have, a lot going on at home, so just getting any book out that I can publish helps a lot. Another thing that I'm trying right now that's really new that I'm just starting out on, that I'm working with a business coach on. She suggested to cater better to my email list and what they want. She goes, you have like thousands or hundreds of thousands, or not hundreds of thousands, thousands of people that like are on your list. Those are the people that will buy your book and tell your friends. You need to sell to them better. So I just recorded a video and I sent out an email newsletter and just said, so what do you guys want? Like, I'm here to serve you, and I want this email list to be something you're excited about. So tell me what you want. And I was totally expecting them to say, we want like more free books, we want all this stuff. But most of them said, we want glimpses into the life of an author. We want updates on your next book. And then they wanted like exclusive short stories. Like some of them had specific characters. They wanted to know what happened next. And they wanted writing advice, which like totally shocked me. So that's going to be another marketing strategy to kind of bring those troughs a little higher so they don't go quite so low, and see if just that word of mouth coming from those people who are diehard fans will help. And another thing that's helped is releasing my audiobook months away from the ebook and paperback. Seems to kind of help bring renewed interest into the book itself. So I'll release the paperback and ebook and then contact my audiobook person or find someone, because I just started my Chicklet series, and then start the audiobook going. And 6 or 7 months later, when things are starting to die down, I release the audiobook. I get the 25 free codes from ACX, and I say, okay, look, all you guys have to do here on Instagram is just like tag a friend and say, just like tag a friend and like this post, and you guys can get a free audiobook. And then I give away these audiobooks, but that also has generated just attention to my other books. So that's something else that has helped. And what I said at the beginning, I want to circle back to, is just my presence on Facebook. So I've catered and tried really hard the past couple years to just be interesting on Facebook without selling my book. So I just like ask questions or talk about random stuff either on my author page, but also just on my like main profile page. And that alone, I think, has just generated people constantly coming back to my profile page. So this week I posted, like I just said, name the best movie quote of all time. And I said, obviously, it's I'm Your Huckleberry from Tombstone, right? Like that's, I think, the best movie quote ever. And I got like hundreds of people responding, like their favorite movie quotes, and I interact with almost everyone. And just driving that sort of attention to my profile generates people that I don't expect to see my profile, because I had a friend from high school that I seriously haven't talked to in like 12 or 13 years that was like, hey, I tried out your book. I'm like obsessed. I'm buying all of them today. They're so good. I like see all your stuff on Facebook, and I finally bought it, and I think it's really cool. That's like one sale, but that's one sale that they brought it up to me, and so I know that there are others happening in the background that they aren't speaking to it. So that's another way that I have found just to kind of keep evergreen content applicable in terms of actual books. Did that answer your question?
No, that's great. It's like you had a list you were going down through. I didn't even have to say anything. So
Oh yeah, I was trying to think about it. I'm not organized by nature, so I have to try really hard.
That's great that you're having some interaction and success on Facebook. Do you find that the YA readers are finding you there, or is it more of the adult readers?
No, yeah, YA is like Snapchat and Instagram, and I just haven't gotten on Snapchat yet. It's like one more social media that I'd have to manage, and it just doesn't speak naturally to me like Facebook. I'm really I'm extroverted, but I'm also very connection driven, and I find connection easiest on Facebook, which is why I think I do so well on it. And the other thing is they're really big on Instagram, and I'm sort of good at Instagram, but not as good. And I'm working on it, but it's just like one more thing that I'm trying to integrate into my life every day. That being said, I actually find I connect best through email with my YA readers. I had a reader, her name is Samantha, out of North Carolina, that started an Instagram account, like fan page for Miss Mabel's. She'll like post on that pretty often, and people will sometimes go to that. But I get emails a lot from teenagers more than like Instagram messages or anything like that, and that has seemed to be the easiest way to talk to them. And actually, Wattpad. I did a book tour before, and all of the teenagers I talked to in the high schools that I went to, like there's probably like in a crowd of 50, there's probably 10 that knew Wattpad, and I had mentioned it. They all came running up to me and told me their profile name, so I wrote them down, and then I went and like read one of their stories and commented, and now they're like diehard fans, and they like are always writing me messages.
Wow, that sounds pretty daunting to go on a book tour to teenagers. Like little kids would be okay, they're cute, they're fun. Was there any, I don't know, lip or sass? What's the word teenagers would say?
No, I love teenagers. I really do. I love working with teenagers. I think teenagers are easier for me than kids. I love kids too, but teenagers are a bit easier to like sell and make it sticky, because a teenager can go home and tell their parents, I really want this book, and they're going to be really more likely to buy it. Where if, when you are like teaching to like selling to kids, you really need to sell to their parents. So elementary school visits aren't very profitable unless you're actually getting paid to go to the elementary school. There's a children's book author, Maria Desmondi, that's done a bunch of podcasts on that. She actually has elementary schools pay her and fly her out to talk to the kids, but she doesn't make money much other ways, as much like that way. So the teenagers were fine. Some of them were like not as interested, but that's not a big deal, because the ones who were interested were immediately like talking to me after like my presentation. I had some books there. They like used our lunch money to buy them, that kind of stuff. So the people who were applicable were definitely engaged like right away.
It does seem to be an age group that if you can win them over, that like they could become super fans. And since they are on all those social media sites, they can be talking you up even if you're not on the Snapchat. Here's a book cover and I talked to the author today.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, you mentioned that you got 4 book bubs last year, and so I think some people here are like, "Oh, what is she doing? What's the secret?" Especially since I've heard from other YA authors that the category is just all YA, that it's not like YA fantasy, YA paranormal,
Yeah.
YA sci-fi, and that it can be pretty challenging to get in. Do you have any tips or ideas on why they wanted you? Besides
I
that, your
don't
books are awesome, of course.
Right, naturally. So I think what happened was my first book bub with Miss Mabel's School for Girls was like a sprawling success. Like it just did extremely well. I think like because I got to number one in all of fantasy on Kindle that day, and then in 2015 I won the that award that came with a gold sticker that I put on the cover, and having that, and then I don't even know how many reviews I have. I never read them. I think I have close to 200 now. Having just the number of reviews I have, the gold sticker on the front, and being able to say to BookBub when I apply, like, hey, I had this ad with you last year. I sold 3,000 copies. I made it to number one in fantasy the first day. I sold this many copies over here. That, uh, that's kind of how it laid out. That seems to have helped. I've only been rejected, and I feel so bad saying this. I know some people have been rejected so many times. My books, I've probably been rejected 5 times, and I think I've had 6 or 7 book bubs now, and that it seems to come in spurts. Like last year, I just kept applying just to see what happened, and they just kept getting accepted. So Miss Mabel's School for Girls had the second book bub of February last year, and it was an even bigger success than the first time. I think I made it to number 2 in fantasy on Kindle. I was number 1 in front of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on like Kobo and some other sites. It just did really well, and I just made sure to include that. So then when I applied for the book bub with the prequel of the series, I just said this is the prequel to the series. The first book in the series, this is the information on it. This is how it did, and they accepted it. I think the second time. And then when I submitted Bonbons Yoga Pants for free ad in the women's fiction category, I can't remember if they have chick lit specifically. I just told them, I was like, this story has like 1.5 million reads on Wattpad. Like I have 40,000 followers on Wattpad because of the story. I just put a new cover on it. This is the situation in the book, and it got it on the first one. And then the network series collection, the original price is $9.99, and I discounted it to $2.99. And then I just told them all about. I was like, hey, I had a book bub with Mildred's Resistance and Miss Mabel School for Girls, and I sold this many. This was my ranking. I know this will sell, and just tell them anything about my series that would sell the book. And it seems to help because I've been getting the ads. And the other thing that I think helps with that is I just try to maximize every book bub in every way possible. So like this book bub I just did, I listened to Dan Woods, who is on Drafted Digital. He did that like hour-and-a-half podcast with you guys. I listened to that before the book bub, like a month before, like right before I was accepted, and he had said in there, like, just email us if you have like a book bub or something, and we'll try to get you some help. So I just emailed Dan and said, hey, look, I have a book bub. Can you get me on that list on iTunes that you talked about in the podcast at Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing? And Mark from Kobo is a friend of mine, and so I just emailed Mark and said, hey, like, what can we do on Kobo to maximize this? And can you like put in a good word with me with Dan? And so he kind of connected me with Dan. So I was just pulling every network connection I had, and Dan said he would try and get me on it. I never heard back, so I don't know if I did, but the book has been doing really well on iTunes. Was in like the top 20 in ebooks for a couple days. I think it's off now. I haven't looked. So that has also helped maximize my book bub success. So when I reapply, I can just say, hey, this is what happened last time. And then keeping track of all those numbers so that I can put them on my book bub application helps a ton. Unfortunately, like I can do that because I've had book bubs in the past. So I think it kind of makes it easier to say, look, we've already proven this book will sell. It sold last year. Let's try it again this year. And I think they're willing to take a bet. So I know it's so hard for first-time people who are trying to get a book bub because they've never had one. So they don't have those statistics. And that's the hard part, is that I feel like I just got really lucky with BookBub, whether it's phenomenal covers, just enough reviews, or if I just kind of lucked out and I got the right editor at BookBub to take my book the first 2 times, and then they've seen the proven success, and we'll take the others. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I've talked about it before in here, but I've definitely had the experience with me, with some of my series, they like always take them pretty much, like my Dragon Blood books. But I have my pen name who can't get book bubs. I think we've had 2 in 3 years and not any recently. And I mean, I've mentioned before, like sci-fi romance isn't a category on there, and they tend to want to put it in paranormal romance, which is a horrible fit. And then if they put it in science fiction, people get pissed. Like, there was sex in my spaceship book. What happened? So I think some people are in the same boat. And it sounds interesting that in the YA category, I'm thinking maybe they must have a pretty big fantasy list. Maybe all the people that like the Harry Potter and kind of grew up into the next stage could be on there, because it sounds like, yeah, you did really well when you got picked up.
Well, and one other thing I should probably clarify is that I actually mostly apply to fantasy, not young adult, because there was one book bub, I can't remember if it was Miss Mabel's or it might have been Mildred's Resistance, the prequel that I did in young adult, and it only sold like 1,000 copies, which sounds totally ridiculous because that's an amazing amount of books. But compared to like the 35, almost 4,000 copies I just sold on Miss Mabel's on like this last book bub on Monday across all platforms, that's almost nothing. So I don't even apply to the young adult category for my books. I just apply to fantasy because I mean, I think fantasy has like 1 million like 1 million followers, like people that it goes out to, or something. I can't remember, some ridiculous number. And young adult's much smaller. Yeah, and then like my Bon Mods yoga pants, it was a free one. I was like, I'm already giving away free on Wattpad. I'll just see what it does like on a BookBub. And it gave away almost 50,000 copies and got like a lot of reviews, I think, like almost 100. But I haven't like seen much spillover since. Like I didn't even get very many email subscribers. I think I got like 100 email subscribers from it. Where my second Miss Mabel's campaign, I made sure to really optimize my back matter on my fantasy so that like they finish the book and the next page is like, hey, if you want, I think I offered the second book free for a while. I was like, if you want this book free, just subscribe to my list. I had like 700 subscribers sign up in like 2 or 3 days. So I think fantasy itself just generates a ton more traction than maybe other genres do, especially YA with BookBub. And again, I think it's more of an audience thing because fantasy lovers are like fantasy lovers. They love fantasy. They seek it out. They find it. Where young adult, it's like it's kind of a mixed genre almost. You have older people and younger people if the younger people can access the ebooks.
That's a good tip and good for people to know, because I actually would have just kind of assumed, oh, I'm putting it in the YA category on Amazon. I have to, try to get the YA BookBub. Now I'm curious if the person I know who's had trouble getting the YA ones should be trying fantasy or sci-fi instead of just worrying about age groups. All right, well, let me ask you, you talked a little bit about Facebook, and I think I saw somewhere that you have kind of a Facebook group for indie author parents. Is that part of your overall marketing strategy, like for networking, or is that just something you started for fun?
It's kind of both. So when I was pregnant with my son, I was working like 9-10 hours a day as an author. It was awesome. I could bust out like 4 or 5 books a year. It was awesome. And I was really nervous because I just remember thinking like, what is my life going to be like when I have a baby? Because not only did I have a baby, but I have 2 Vishlas, like we've talked about, and they're needy little suckers. And I also have a husband who deploys all the time. So my husband was gone. Like the first 6 months of my son's life, my husband was deployed for 3 of them. And, he's just like in and out. So I just didn't even know what my writing world would look like. And that was really scary. And I remember like Googling, like, can I self-publish and be a new mom? Like, can I self-publish and be a military wife? Like, what should I expect? And I couldn't find any answers. And even now, like sometimes I'll just like Google, like, what's it like? Like how can you be an author and a parent to a toddler? Like how does this world fit? And I just had a hard time finding that information. So I was like, well, if I can't find it, I'm just going to put it out there. So I started this Facebook group as a way for like other parents who are indie authors to just find what they need that I couldn't find. So like on my website, on my blog, it's kcrosswriting.com. I just started putting out articles or like blog posts like, look, this is what it's been like for me to have a newborn. This is how I work. This is how many hours I work now. This is what I'm struggling with. This is how it's possible. This is how it's not possible. It's like, or I'm a military wife. Here's how I work during deployment. And here's how I work during deployment with the son. And then even now, it's like, actually working with a newborn was like almost easier than now because my son has opinions and he runs really fast and we live in the mountains, and so I have to like really watch him carefully because he can just like run out into the trees. So it's harder now to write because I have to like keep him alive, where when they're newborn you can kind of put him in a bassinet like by your computer and at least answer emails or something. So I'm just blogging and putting in this group information that I wished I'd had. And I needed help when I was a new parent, like just keeping track of stuff because the industry changes so fast. And my time was so limited. When I did have time, I just wrote. So I just put away social media. So I didn't know what was going on. I was like, what's happening here? So in this indie author group, I just wanted to create a place to be what I didn't have. So I update it with like network things that are going on in the publishing world that are maybe pertinent to self-publishers who don't have time to keep up with it. Or I just post about being a parent, or I just post like funny tweets that make me laugh, because sometimes at the end of a long day you just need someone to make you laugh, because you're just like tired of your child screaming at you all day. So that's what that group was born out of, was just a desire to connect people like me that didn't have the resources I felt I desperately needed at that time. And right now it's still like small, but it's really like sweet because the people who are there are like really engaging. So you don't have to be a parent to be in there. It's like my blog is kind of catered more towards parenting, but all of the information that I give in this group and on my blog is like just pertinent to self-publishers. Like, look, this is the industry, this is what's going on. Oh, if you're gonna have kids, maybe think about this later. Or if you have kids right now, hey, try this out. Or just commiserate with me because my son just tried to hit me, or something. And it's been a good place to just connect with people. And I've brought people in the self-publishing industry that can be resources. I have like social media expert. I have a podcaster that's like an expert podcaster. I have like Mark from Kobo. I have editors. I have cover designers. I have ebook designers. I have interior typesetters. I have anyone that a self-publisher could need. So if they have a question like, how the heck do I typeset a book? They can just like post in this group and say, how do I do this? And my typesetter, Chris Bell, can say, well, here, let me help you out. Or these are my rates. Or maybe try this, Google this, and give some direction, because it's so hard to find that for anyone, and I just really struggled with that. So that's kind of why I made that. And it's just a way for me to like keep in touch with the people on my blog, and to continue just being seen, I guess.
All right, cool. And now I'm imagining like your son running out into the trees and a bear eating him while you're like, oh, I just got to finish this chapter. Hang on.
Yeah, he's pretty fast. We got a fence up, so he's a lot safer now. But when we first moved here, we have like 5 acres on our lot. And when we first moved here, he was gone for like 30 seconds. And I was like, where's the baby? And I looked outside and he'd already run like halfway down to the road, because there's like a really little like 2-inch deep ditch down there and he loves water. So I was like, oh, this is not good. Our 2 dogs do a pretty good job of keeping most of the animals away. So we haven't seen anything too dangerous yet.
All right, one last question for me, since you mentioned that you did pretty well on Wattpad. I guess it's more not a question, but do you have any tips for other authors who are maybe trying to use Wattpad as a way to kind of get some early reviewers, or just find their first fans on there before they publish?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of posts on this. A lot of people ask me this, so I have some like good, I think, quick advice that people can implement really easy. When it comes to Wattpad, you want to generate a culture, like you want to generate a following, and you do that just by being authentic. So at the end of every chapter that I would post, I would put in bold just a little note like, hey, like in this chapter, Lexi totally binged eat a bunch of candy bars. Like, tell me your favorite candy bar. What's your favorite candy bar? And then I just like, thanks so much for reading. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. And I would just talk to my readers. And at first, no one really talked back. Every now and then someone would talk back, but after a while it just kind of gained its own momentum and people looked forward to answering those questions. And I would always put funny memes in a picture, because you can put video and memes at the top of the Wattpad story. I would always put funny memes that were like relevant to that chapter. I know some authors that put just like they do like some sort of design work, like a kind of like a meme, but like some graphic art thing that they'll put at the top of the chapter that's similar to their cover, and it just looks really good. And I think that aesthetic appeal has a lot of attraction when another thing, when I was just getting going, when I could keep up with the comments, I would just reply to everyone, and I try and learn about them. Some of those people, I would go to their profiles, find their story, and start reading and commenting like 1 or 2 chapters a day. Across Wattpad, I'd find someone, comment on a chapter, put their story in my library, and just try and interact. I wasn't able to do that for very long because there's just too many people that came up. So that helped a lot. Regularity is the biggest thing on Wattpad. So, and being honest about it. So if I were starting a new story on Wattpad, and when I do start a new story on Wattpad, I always do an author's note, and I just say, I'm posting every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll probably post in the morning, and I'm going to try and do that, until the end of the book. And then if like Wednesday comes along and my son is sick and my husband's gone and I just can't post, then I just send out a message and say, I'm so sorry I can't post today. It's been really busy. I'll see you Friday. Because what happens on Wattpad most of the time is people start stories and then they just kind of lose momentum and they just leave it. But they have readers who are reading those stories and wants to know what happened. So they get all disappointed. So most readers on Wattpad are used to stories just dropping and ending and never finishing. So I can't tell you how many times I get like messages and comments like, oh my gosh, you update all the time. This is so awesome. I look forward to it every Friday or whatever. That helps a lot. So regularity and transparency, just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, help me out. Another thing that helped a lot was posting really frequently. So there were when I put my book Miss Maples up, I started posting like once every 3 days, I think, or it was like 3 times a week, things Monday, Wednesday, Friday, until it generated some traction and I was seeing the reads go up. And then I started posting every single day. And that went on, I think, for 2 months. And that's when I saw the reads really starting to spike, is when I started posting every day. And I posted at the same time every day. And I even had like some kids saying that they would get the notification when they were like in class at school and they would like go to the bathroom to read the chapter or something. So they like knew when the chapters were coming in. And I think that was most important. So regularity, like knowing how often you're going to post, posting often, and generating a kind of culture around the book helps a lot. One other thing I did, like I'll put things like an asterisk, like you put like an action, like I always put throws glitter or like glitter bomb or something like that in my chick lit novels because people love it in chick lit. And so I have people constantly like throwing different types of glitter, like throws animal glitter or Kit Kat glitter or whatever. And that's just like this one girl just always does that when she comments on my books. And all of these other commenters just started throwing glitter all the time. So it was just like this thing that was kind of like part of my brand on Wattpad that people looked for and knew and just kind of helped set me apart a little bit from the rest. And I get a lot of comments on my profile. And so I always respond to comments on my profile when I can. I get a ton of like private messages. I can't really respond to those as much, but the genuine, authentic ones, I always respond to. So just being reliable in that regard seems to go farthest in Wattpad. So those are my 4 hard and fast suggestions for a better following on Wattpad. But I also want to add a caveat that, like, if you're not doing like fan fiction or teen or romance in some regard, you're going to struggle a little bit more in getting like high reads. Not that you can't, but just it will take more time. And Wattpad is kind of a time game in some cases. Sometimes it's not. So yeah, that'd be my.
All right, cool. Thanks for the tips. And I will say I tried with the pen name to start a book on Wattpad and see how it did. But I found with the romance that if anything was graphic, they'd kind of put you in. People had to like check that they wanted to find adult content, and so I just felt like that was probably not I mean, it was okay. I got some reads, but it definitely seems more catered to like the teen audience. Or I could see the chick lit doing well on there too.
Yeah, because like I said, my fantasy doesn't do as great, but chick lit does really well.
All right. Well, let me pass you to the guys for a few more questions.
Yep. All right. So I'm gonna tie a couple of my questions from earlier into this section, but it seems like you were saying that the young adult audience is a little bit hard to target, and a lot of the readers of your young adult stuff aren't young adults, or at least don't fit the usual age range of young adults. So if you have a book that's borderline, would you say that it's better to attempt to pursue the young adult audience, or just focus on standard marketing and just get what you get?
I honestly think it depends on the book and like if it's what else it's borderline. Like if it's borderline young adult fantasy, um, I honestly think it depends on the author too. Like if you love Instagram and Snapchat, go for young adult. Like you're gonna do awesome. If you naturally have like a younger audience following you, or you're just a younger person. Like if you're like 20 years old, self-publishing a young adult novel, definitely go young adult because those are your peeps right now, type thing. But I would say like if you're my age, not like I'm so old, but in your 30s, whatever, you're like away from your teen years, and you could hedge it more towards fantasy, and it could go that way, then I might hedge it a bit more towards fantasy. Again, that totally depends on the book, I think. My young adult books are pretty clean. Like there's not swear words, there's no sex. There's a really slow burn romance that goes through the books, and it's done really well as a young adult. But most of my readers are not young adult either, so I think I hedge more towards fantasy as a safety.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Another thing, like regarding young adult, which is something I've thought about, and I suppose you sort of haven't been in the biz long enough to really be able to have to grapple with this, but like if you start targeting younger audiences age. So there may come a time, I'm sure, when if your series goes on long enough, your core audience is going to age out of the newer books in the series, and like is that the sort of thing you have to sort of plan for?
I know that happens, but I haven't really seen it be an actual issue yet, because I feel like when people find a series they really love, it's not going to really matter like what age they are. Do you know what I mean? That would never affect my decisions in putting out a book series.
Yeah, it's good to hear, and I feel like that makes sense because if a book is good, it is a good book. Like it's sort of a tautology there, but there is merit beside. Like there's no element of a book that you have to be a certain age to enjoy, particularly because mental, state of mind can vary greatly even within an age, right? So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, and you think about like Harry Potter.
Yes.
I mean, everybody reads Harry Potter.
Yes.
It's middle grade, but it's not middle grade. And then, like one of my favorite book series is the Gemma Doyle series, and Gemma Doyle's like 16. I'm in my 30s, and I adore that book. And I just got an email from a lady that said she's 60 and she adores my books. So that's why I think a good story is a good story. I think your fans are gonna stick with it.
All right, excellent. All right, so earlier you were talking about, we had actually, in last week's episode, we talked about things that BookBub seems like they do to make their selections, and we had said that it seems like they're taking more weight on past performance and also awards, and now you say that like you include all of that in your little comment area, and it seems to have helped. So first off, it seems like that might be an accurate assessment based upon their statements, but more to the point, you were saying that you keep track, like you were saying, like you kept track of how many books you sold and various other things like that. What do you keep track of, and how do you keep track of it?
So the day of the BookBub, I just pay closer attention to rankings, especially on places like Kobo and iTunes and Nook, those places, because it's going to be a lot easier to shoot a lot higher and to stay there. So like on Kobo for like 2 days on last year, I was ahead of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child in young adult on Kobo wide. So I specifically paid attention to that so I could screenshot it and then share it to Facebook and be like, oh, hey there, JK, look at this. And that itself was a way that I use my Facebook audience to be like, oh, that's pretty legit. Like she's ahead of J.K. Rowling, regardless of whether they know how big Kobo is or not, because Kobo is smaller than Amazon. Everyone is smaller than Amazon in the ebook world. So I specifically pay attention to those details just so I can use it as a form of like, hey, look, I'm on like the top 5 in iTunes. This is awesome. So for those people like my friend from high school who I haven't talked to in 12 years and said, oh, I finally bought your book, that could be like the deciding edge where it kind of pushes them over. And like, oh, well, she just like ranked ahead of J.K. Rowling on this like distributor. That's really cool. I'm just going to go ahead and try it. It's on sale. The other thing I keep track of is just what my sales are doing like that day. So like on Amazon, like 2,500 sales the first day on a BookBub is really good for that book for me. Other people might get more, and I've had a lot less, but it's like 2,500 first day. That's awesome. Like I'm really excited about that number. And then for like the next 2 weeks, I'll just kind of keep track. Like, okay, we're looking at, it cuts in half, it cuts in third, but overall, how long does my long tail last? And then I'll just say to BookBub, the first 2 weeks, like after the ad went live, I ended up selling this many books. I ranked this high, and I was this high on this one. Because basically on BookBub, you want to sell yourself. Like you want to pitch that book so they want to buy that. They want to sell you this ad. So that's just all I try to do, and I just try and keep track of the information that is pertinent to that. And it helps. And I think the more information you can give them, the more informed a decision you can make. So you can say, I ranked on iTunes in the top 20 for a week after this, and I ranked like on Kobo in the top 5 for 2 weeks or whatever it is. Then it just makes it easier for them to say, this was successful before, we're going to sell more books again.
Yeah, it seems obvious in retrospect, but that comment form, your capacity to communicate with the editors, I know I personally have not been putting it to use very much, and the more of their work that you can do for them, I'm sure especially if you actually have interesting and important things to say, it certainly seems like you should be doing that. So I know next time I set up for a BookBub, I'm gonna have to dig up some of my screenshots. Okay. You talk about doing a screenshot when you were ahead of a certain author. I have a folder in my computer that's labeled Proof of Awesome. And up until now, it's basically just been for me, where if I'm having a bad day, I'll click it open and be like, all right, that's when I hit number 9 overall. It's just like, yeah. So I need to click that open and say, oh, this is a milestone I can mention.
Yeah, well, and I just think, again, like we're here to sell our books, and to put that on Facebook, you can't make that up. If you screenshot it, right, it'll show everything you need. And that's just like one more thing to show your fans on Facebook or whatever social media network, like, oh, this author's legit, like, look what they're doing. I just think it helps. And I wish I could take credit for doing that comment thing in BookBub, but I heard it. I think I read it on an article somewhere, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I haven't been taking advantage of the comment section because I had gotten like 3 rejections. And ever since I've really taken advantage of that comment section, it's taken off. But I also wanted to say, I think you're right. I think BookBub does weigh more heavily to books that they've had in the past that have sold. I absolutely think that happens. I think that's why I got 4 last year. And I think having that award on the cover made all the difference.
Yep, definitely seems that way. All right, so that's it for this section. I'll hand you off to Jeff for the last few questions.
Alrighty, let's see here. My first question for you is, you touched on it a little bit, but what's your typical launch strategy when you're releasing a new title? I mean, do you temporarily drop the prices of earlier books? Do you release new titles at a reduced price for the first 2 weeks? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I definitely try and have a reduced price for the first 2 weeks. I've done different things in the past to see what works well, and to be honest, my son really got in the way of my release strategy. So the final book in my series was kind of a disaster. He was colicky. He was like full colic. Like every day from 4 to 9, he would just cry. And my husband was deployed, and it was just a very intense situation. And I finalized my book. Like it had been done. It just gone through proofreading, ebook production while I was doing the newborn months. So when I released it, I literally just put it out there, and I did a blog post, and I said, all right, it's up, just go buy it if you want it, and like help me out if you can, and just spread the word. And actually it was a pretty decent release. But I've also done like the launch parties where I have like a group of people that are dedicated, that I get them paperbacks, I made them t-shirts, I did all that stuff, and then had them help me spread the word. I had them do reviews. That was very helpful just because it got me more reviews at the beginning, and it just got me more social media traction. I also did that at the beginning of my series so that it was easier for people to buy in, because I think we kind of talked about it earlier, but as your series elongates, it's harder to launch and sell lots of books because you kind of have a dedicated fan base at that point. And like a new fan's not going to come in and buy the 5th book. They would need to buy all the books following. So, I'll discount prices, I'll send out email newsletters, but just recently, it might have been this podcast that I was listening to. I can't remember the guy's name, but he does that release strategy where you put it up on Amazon and only release it to like, you know, like your chick lit mailing list or whatever, and then you just let it sit there for 6 weeks before you announce it on social media, because you want like the also bots on Amazon to reflect other books in the genre. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I think we've done so many of these episodes now. It
That was
sounds
Chris
familiar.
Fox.
There
Yeah.
you
Chris
go.
Fox. Okay.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you. Yeah. So I tried that one. So actually, my second chick lit novel has been available since the end of April. I just haven't told anyone because I just wanted to get it out there and try this strategy and kind of let Amazon play with it and get the also bots generated, and then announce it to like my social media and stuff like that to see if it helps. And actually, it's been working. Like, it's been selling without me doing anything. So that is a release strategy I actually plan to use in the future, but I'll do it differently. So I have my next release that will be like early next year, hopefully. It's actually a duology. I'm gonna have both books available like 3 weeks apart. It's called The Dragon Masters. So it's Dragon Masters Part 1 and Dragon Masters Part 2. My plan for Dragon Masters is to release book 1, only tell my fantasy emailing list, because I have several email lists, only tell my fantasy email list, and then just let it sit out there on its own. Then release the second book only to my fantasy email list, let it sit out there, and give both of them like a month together to kind of percolate, and then do a big social media blast and just say, like, you know, these books are available, go read them, there's already reviews up, and also bots on Amazon are already generated to, like, you know, other epic fantasy. So that's what I'm doing with I Am Girl Power right now. But what I just did with I Am Girl Power is I've made a shirt. I just like got on one of those like cheap websites online and just made a shirt with the title, and I have one more that I'm gonna make, and then I have the price discounted to 99 cents, and I'm going to, sorry, my phone's ringing. I'm just gonna like offer the t-shirt as something they can win if like buy the book or share it on social media and you're entered in this drawing for this t-shirt. That in the past has gotten me a lot of attention. And one other big thing I did that actually helped a lot was I partnered with a candy company. So in the second book in my series, there's like a candy shop that is famous for their caramels. And I did it specifically because there's a lady I know that runs a candy shop, and she's known for her caramels. It's the Little Red Hen Candy Company. So what I did was I had a special label that was Miss Mabel's caramels, and she sold those through her website, and I gave them away as part of the giveaway and had those available for people to win and to like buy separately for themselves as like an incentive, just like some other tie-in. She sent an email out to her email list and said, we have this special like Miss Mabel's caramels line. And so the release went out like to a lot of people there, and then I had all these people that wanted these really delicious caramels that were doing these giveaways and buying them, and they got a discount on the book. So, you know, I've done very complicated releases, and I've done releases where I literally didn't do anything because I just didn't have time. And there's a difference like when you can put time into the release, but I think if you write good books and you have really loyal fans, you can still have a really good release with less oomph behind it, I guess.
How exactly does one partner with a candy company? I don't think I've ever heard that one before.
I know, it was a really unique thing. I'm glad I did it because the caramel sold for a long time after. Like, she was still getting orders after like a year. So I called her. Her name is Holly. I just called her. I knew her through a family member. She's like a friend of the family. And I just said, Holly, I have this great idea. I'm going to write you into my book, and I want to like link your caramels with my book for the release. And then she had like copies of my books in her shop with like the caramels. So I had Jenny, my graphic designer, design like a label for the Miss Mabel's caramels, and then Holly sent that label to whoever her printer is that does the stickers for her caramels carton, and they put that sticker on, and she did special packaging. She didn't charge me anything because I was basically bringing business to her, but she was maybe bringing business to me. So I just pitched this idea to her, and she was all about it, and so we did it. And it was just one more way I could kind of change, like make the release really unique, and just add a different element that, you know, wasn't just the book, and engage people in a different way. And it was awesome. And actually, when I released that book, the second book, I did a book bub. My first book bub for my first book was the day before. So the book bub for Miss Mabel's was October 15th, and I released the second book October 16th. And I think, and I had both of them in Kindle Unlimited. That's when I did a Kindle Unlimited. I had them both in there, and I think that made a big difference also because I had tons of borrows. That's before the pages read. I had just tons of borrows, lots of really good like purchases. People bought it. Miss Mabel's was high in the ranking, so people immediately went to the second book. So those are some release strategies that I've tried.
Candy Company, I'll have to remember that one.
I just think that's so valuable to think outside the box. And when I emailed my email list and said, hey, what do you guys want from me? Like, what can I give you that is like relevant content that you are excited about? Like, people said they wanted t-shirts. Like, I had a fan say, like, I would wear the hell out of a Miss Mabel's t-shirt. I was like, okay, I can do that. So that's why I thought with this release of my Chicklet book, I'm going to have t-shirts and I'm going to give them an opportunity to win it by just, all I have to do is share on social media, and I can see it on Facebook who shares, and if they buy it and send me proof, awesome, that's another entry. So those are some ways that I've tried to engage people with book releases, especially at the beginning of a series. I feel like it pays off the best when I have the time and means to do that.
You mentioned you use Facebook quite a bit. Have you ever experimented with their advertising?
Yeah.
Good or bad?
Both. Sometimes it's almost nothing, and sometimes my organic reach is better than the paid reach. I will say I've had the best luck. I did a Facebook Live video. So I released a cookbook under my Chicklet series. So my Chicklet series is all about women and their relationship with food and themselves, basically. The first book is about Lexi Green. She is overweight and is trying to get healthy for the first time, and it's her journey about learning that health is more than a number on the scale. And the second book, Megan, she's really healthy. She exercises a lot, but she really struggles in the dating world, and she doesn't feel like she's good enough because of that. So it's like food is like this major theme that runs through all of them. So I was thinking, how can I get a different stream of revenue into this series that revolves around this theme? So I decided to pair up with a food blogger and create a cookbook. So we did. So we created a cookbook around my Health and Happiness Society series. It's the Health and Happiness Cookbook as a funnel for my Chicklet, because I'm obsessed with food also. And what I did to release that book was I did a Facebook Live video. And it was the first one I ever done, and I was so freaking nervous. Like, I started the video and I was like, I am really nervous. I'm so bad at live video, but you guys got to listen to this really cool, exciting announcement. And it was viewed like tens of thousands of times over like the course of a week. Like, tons of people watched it. I didn't even have to promote it. It just went on its own. But then I did promote it after a while just to keep the juice going. And I still had a better organic reach than I did a paid reach. And sometimes, most of the time when I use Facebook advertising, I do it on my Facebook author page, and I just boost a post to people who have liked my page. So if there's like a specific post I want people who have liked my page to see, I'll just boost it that way. So when I announce my indie author group, the Indie Author Life group that I have, I boosted that post just to people who have liked my page and their friends, because people who have liked my page are indie authors and people that like my books, but I wanted mostly these indie authors that follow me to see, hey, I've got this group, you need to get in on it. And that seemed to work really well. I got a lot of response from people I hadn't heard from in a long time. So in that way it was successful, but I rarely set up an ad from nothing. I just do the boost post for those like little things I need people to see, but I don't really often set up an ad. I haven't had a lot of success that like makes me want to do that. And I hear, from what I understand, like the more money you spend, the more success you have on it. And if you're only spending like $5-10, it can't go that far anyway. But I have a hard time sinking a lot of money into Facebook ads.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now that you've released nearly a dozen titles, is there anything you wish you could have done differently when releasing your earlier books?
No, actually, I don't know if I just have
that often.
I just don't know if I have like a low standard of expectation because I have a toddler and a military husband now. Or if I really tried to work my releases to the max when I had the time. So when I was working full-time as an author and I had time to do like that Carmel's release and get a book bub and stage it around the release and do all those things, it really paid off. And I think those release strategies, like thinking outside the box, trying to align the stars perfectly if I could, has made all the difference now because I had so much exposure at the beginning and was able to build up like a really good email list to buy the later books. So the later books, I didn't have time to put a lot of like energy into the releases, but I also had like a pretty solid group of people who were going to buy it anyway. So as soon as I sent the email and said, hey, it's out, go for it, I knew I would have people that would buy it. So
Very, very cool. Okay, that's it for my questions. Let me hand you back over to Lindsay. We'll see if we can wrap this up for you.
As I'm typing in the other tab to the live chat people. But no, Craig was wondering, what was the actual name of your Facebook group in case people, if you're assuming you're taking new people, how can they find it on Facebook?
Yeah, we're always taking new people. It's indie author life. So if you go to my Facebook page, it's facebook.com/Katie Cross Writing. Just go to that, and then it's like the group is like linked to my Facebook page, so you can just find it there. And then, I mean, I'll just approve you. I'll look tonight, and I'll approve anyone that kind of comes in over the next couple days. It's such a fantastic resource for self-publishers because there's literally everyone that you could need in this industry. There is someone representing it. It's awesome.
All right, cool. And I will link to it in the show notes if people want to find it that way. Maybe in the future too. We get people that find all the old episodes and listen, months from now. One more question from Benjamin. I'm not sure if he was asking this to you or just asking it into the chat, but he was wondering about revenue streams on Wattpad. And I know I've heard they have an advertising program. Is that something you do?
Yeah, so I am part of the advertising program on Wattpad. It basically, how it works is it's an ad thing. So I think they gauge it by 30 minutes. So if a person is reading for 30 minutes and they finish a chapter, at the end of the chapter there will be an ad. And they even have like a sentence that's on there before the ad that says, we have these here to help pay our authors on Wattpad. So if you watch this, you're supporting Wattpad authors. And authors actually make more than 50% of the revenue on the ads on Wattpad. So Wattpad is actually making less than the authors. And if the person like clicks on that ad, I've even had some ads pop up. They're like games. You could like play games. I thought it was really fun. You could like play games or just watch the ad. They're like, I don't know, 20 seconds. Then the author gets like, 50% of that revenue, and then they're paid quarterly. So I think you have to be part of the Wattpad Stars program to do that because it's still in beta. They're pretty controlled on who's doing that right now because they're still figuring out like the payment portal and how it's working and kind of tweaking the algorithms and stuff for it. But the fact that Wattpad has moved to being able to generate revenue for their authors is a huge step. And they said, like, when I signed up for it and started doing that, some authors were making like thousands of dollars a quarter for it, which they probably are because some stories on Wattpad have like tens of millions of reads. I mean, it's ridiculous, or hundreds of millions of reads. And those people are probably getting a lot of ads viewed. For me, I've seen it's been like less than $200 per, I think, 6 months for my book, and I have 6 or 7 novels up that are read pretty regularly. So it's not like super lucrative for me yet, but I can see it being so in the future. And as long as people are reading your books on Wattpad, then you have opportunity to be making money.
All right, for those of you thinking of One Direction fan fiction, this may be the way to cash in. All right. On that note, I'll just finish by saying, is there anything else that you'd kind of like to plug that you're working on, or where can people find you online? You said the Facebook group, but where else?
Just find me either on that Facebook group or kcrosswriting.com. I have a lot of people that are always asking for my advice and for my help with self-publishing since I've kind of been doing it for 5 years and managed a lot of aspects. And I wasn't really able to help people great because I was always answering emails and I don't have like a lot of time. So I just started opening up coaching calls for anyone, like, especially for people who are like in the middle of self-publishing and just need help getting something going, or just need someone to kind of look outside, someone outside their business to look at their business and say, well, try this, go here, do this, or just someone to ask questions or answer questions or help decide if self-publishing is for them. That's kind of what these coaching calls are geared toward. Right now, there's a promo price going for $49 because I just started it. slots have actually been filling up really fast. So if anyone's interested, they can just apply through my website or that author group or the indie author group or anything like that. So.
All right, cool. And this is episode 136, guys. So I'll put in all the links that Katie mentioned, and it'll be marketingsff.com. Just come on by and look it up, or go straight to her site. That works too. Thanks for all the great information. It's fun that you have done some things that other guests in 100 episodes have not done. I'm pretty sure you're the first chocolate person on here, for sure.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was awesome.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for
guys.
hanging out with us, Katie. It's good.
Yeah, thank you.
So long, everybody.